It is 2 in the morning. You are dead tired. But instead of sleeping, your brain is playing a greatest hits compilation of every awkward conversation, missed deadline, and minor mistake you made today. Psychologists call these sudden flashes of self-doubt automatic negative thoughts, or ANTs. They are brief, shorthand appraisals of failure, a quick internal voice whispering, "I messed up." Normally, a negative thought enters your mind and eventually fades, but sometimes the brain refuses to let it go. It locks on to that single thought, spinning it into a continuous recycling chain. This specific condition is called rumination. A passing thought about a mistake won't ruin your life. The trap occurs when your mind loses the ability to let that thought pass, mutating a fleeting moment of doubt into a psychological loop you can't escape. To understand why we get stuck, we have to look at the goal progress theory. Thanks to an evolutionary quirk known as the Zeigarnik effect, human brains are hardwired to remember and fixate on unfinished tasks, much more than completed ones. If you leave a puzzle half-finished, your brain nags you to complete it. The problem is, the brain also misinterprets abstract emotional distress, like an unresolved argument or a vague sense of inadequacy, as an unachieved goal. This logic model shows what happens next. An emotional trigger activates the brain's default mode network to solve the problem. But abstract emotions don't have tangible step-by-step solutions, so the brain searches for an exit point, fails to find one, and the cycle continuously accelerates. When you find yourself overthinking, your brain isn't broken. It's actually using an evolutionary survival tool. It's just glitching because it's applying concrete problem-solving mechanics to an unsolvable emotional abstraction. Once that cycle starts spinning, it rarely looks exactly the same for everyone. The loop mutates to fit your specific circumstances. Sometimes it takes the form of state rumination, where you obsess strictly over the feelings of the past failure. Other times it becomes action rumination, where you relentlessly focus on how you should have corrected a mistake. If you are replaying an awkward social interaction over and over, that's post-event processing. If a highly painful event is playing on loop, you are experiencing stress-reactive rumination. This split bar chart shows a clear statistical disparity. Women are twice as likely as men to experience depressive symptoms linked to repetitive thinking. This gap is largely driven by a higher rate of brooding, passive, internalized negative thoughts, as opposed to neutral, active self-reflection. The specific flavor of the loop, whether you are actively looking for solutions or passively brooding, dictates whether you experience a minor daily annoyance or a severe toll on your mental health. It's easy to confuse this repetitive thinking with simple worry, but comparing the two shows why rumination drives a uniquely destructive downward spiral. Worry is future-oriented. It is an attempt to anticipate negative outcomes and mentally solve problems that haven't happened yet, which is why it is closely linked to anxiety. This timeline maps the difference. Worry sits on a forward-pointing axis, aiming at the future, generating anxiety. Rumination sits on a backward-pointing axis, focused on past failure, pointing toward depression. It traps the brain, endlessly asking abstract, unanswerable questions. Why did that happen? Endlessly asking unanswerable questions about the past does nothing to solve the problem. It only magnifies emotional distress, while entirely paralyzing your ability to take action in the present. Escaping the loop starts with biology. Before you can reason with your thoughts, you have to interrupt the physical fight or flight response. This forces the default mode network to shut down and reboot. One of the fastest ways to do this is the 5-4-3-2-1 method, a grounding exercise designed to forcefully anchor your brain in the present physical environment. In this schematic, we see how the method works by physically severing the feedback loop using external sensory inputs. You identify 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. There are other reliable circuit breakers too. You can use box breathing, inhaling, holding, exhaling, and pausing for 4 seconds each. You can apply the 3-minute rule, intentionally dropping a thought if you can't find a solution within 3 minutes, or simply turn off phone notifications to reduce your baseline cognitive load. These techniques aren't permanent cures. They are emergency physical breaks. They halt the biological cycle of overthinking just long enough for logic to return. Once you stop the immediate physical symptom, you have to address the habit itself. You have to permanently rewire how your brain processes distress. Mindfulness-based interventions teach the brain a new way to interact with negative thoughts. Instead of judging the thought or trying to suppress it, you practice observing it objectively and allowing it to pass on its own. For more persistent overthinking, clinical psychologists use rumination-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, or RFCBT. The core mechanism of RFCBT is forcing the brain to change the questions it asks. In this layout, the abstract, past-oriented question, "Why did I fail?" structurally transforms into a concrete, process-focused question, "How do I handle this right now?" Thinking about your problems isn't a bad thing. Healthy reflection leads to growth, and nobody can completely prevent negative thoughts from arriving. That by shifting from abstract brooding to concrete problem-solving, you can stop those thoughts from becoming a loop.